Imagine arriving at Norwich bus station in 2023 for a wander around the city and everything that you saw took you back to the 1970s. That is what this video will attempt to recreate. Beginning at the bus station, we'll head towards the river, follow the river and the inner link road, and then cover parts outside the inner link road before heading back into the city centre. That's made quite a mess of that map, but hopefully it makes some sort of sense. This is Surrey Street near the Notre Dame School heading into Chapel Loke, where in 2023 we find the John Lewis car park. But bearing in mind this is Chapel Loke, this is where in the 1970s we find the Surrey Chapel, built in 1854 and demolished in 1986, relocating then to Anglia Square. Continue through Chapel Loke and into Burr Street and we find Rudling's Solicitors in a building that in the 1970s was the base for Culling's Coaches, having previously been the King's Arms pub until closure in 1968. Continuing the route down towards the river, the next road is King Street, where we still find evidence of Norwich Lads Club. Looking in 2023 at the King's Centre, it's hard to visualise the 1970s, but here we go, back to the 1970s when Norwich Lads Club stood on this site. We are now very close to the river, looking at Norwich City Football Stadium. If we move back through the apartment blocks and get the camera as high as I can possibly reach, we can compare the view with the football ground of the 1970s. This is the current view of the River Wensum from Riverside Road, looking across to the Norwich School playing field and Bishop Bridge in the distance. The view was much the same in the 1970s, although it looks like Riverside Walk had yet to be established. Looking across the river to the new St James development, the old River Lane and the city wall are retained, and this is the equivalent view from the 1970s. At the other end of River Lane is Barrack Street, with this view looking towards Silver Road. In the 1970s this was the location of the Stewart and Patterson Brewery, but the site would be cleared shortly after this photo was taken. Just into Silver Road, a tower of the old city wall can be seen, with the 1970s equivalent view somewhat less attractive. On to Magdalen Road and its Tesco Express, which replaced the Magdalen Road Congregational Church, seen here on the last day that it was open. This is the 2023 view of the Barn Roads and Crispin Roads roundabout, followed by the 1970s equivalent view. To the northwest of this point is the Gibraltar Gardens pub, seen here in the present day and here in the 1970s. The earliest part of the building is said to date from 1470. This is the end of Upper St Giles Street and the pedestrian bridge over Grapes Hill. Back in the 1970s, this picture shows the construction of the bridge and Grapes Hill itself. Into St Benedict Street, and some of the buildings in the foreground have changed since the 1970s, when this was the site of Bywells, Cash and Carry. Dropping down the steps in front of this building into Westwick Street and looking across to Coslany Street, this appears to be the office of Municipal Mutual, but it has in fact closed. It used to be the fermentation hall of Bullard's Brewery, although even by the early 1970s the brewery had closed this site. Its use is now residential. On the corner of Duke Street and Muspole Street is this building. It had been the Whip and Nag pub, but that had closed by 1960. This is the Duke Street Bridge, the original structure of which was replaced in the 1970s when the new bridge and its surroundings looked like this. The old bridge can still be seen at the entrance to the Castle Quarter car park. This is St Andrew's Plain in 2023 compared to the 1970s when St Andrew's Brew House was known as the Festival House. This is the yard and the car park of the Telephone Exchange looking out towards St Andrew Street. The tiny Tudor building was built as a home in the 15th century, but it became part of the Theatre de Leu Cinema in the 1930s, which is seen here being demolished in the 1970s, leaving just the small Tudor building. These buildings are in Pottergate, and the one on the right, number 10, is seen here back in the 1970s. Across the city to the Theatre Royal, which has occupied this site since 1758, making it one of the country's oldest theatres. This is what it looked like some 50 years ago. With the Bell Hotel on the left, this is the 2023 view of Orford Hill, the tree having matured somewhat since the 1970s. At the back of Anglia Television, this is Crown Road. Back in the 1970s, it was still possible to get access from this point through to Agricultural Hall Plain, and you can see the Royal Hotel in the background. Let's conclude with a couple of aerial shots of the Norwich of the 1970s.